The other day, I got in the truck and I kicked on, and Prime Country came on, and I happened to catch it just the time. Toby Keith was talking about the inspiration for one of his songs, okay? And he was kind of just telling the story about how it was. I guess he had a friend, when he was younger, and had a friend who had broken up with his longtime girlfriend. And so he had, Toby Keith had called him, and the guy was he was in a bad place because the reason they'd broken up, come to find out she had been cheating on him, was seeing other guys. And so when Toby kind of says something to the effect of, well, I bet you that you're glad you know now. And his friend said, no, I wish I didn't know now. Well, if you haven't figured it out, that is the foundation for Toby Keith's song, Wish I Didn't Know Now. And then it continues, What I Didn't Know Then. And I know it's not a Christian song, but anyway, we're not going to play it today, but you can listen to it on the way home. But it fits into our message, okay? And the reason I say that, because the message really something a principle that we're talking about today, and that is you don't know what you don't know. And that is probably one of the toughest things in life that we struggle with, is figuring out that there are times trying to learn what we don't know, because we don't know it. And that really is, I think it is a struggle. And if I know we're all, well, not me. We've all been there. I guarantee you, every single one of us in this room, there is a decision that you made in your life, or there is a track of your life that would have turned out differently if you would have known something then that you know now. Something you didn't know then, now you figured it out. I mean, you think about when you bought your first house. I guarantee you, there were, whether it was, negotiations or the process or, or the lending or the timing of things, whatever, you don't know what you don't know. And I guarantee you there's things that you probably would have done differently if you knew then. Parents, the one thing we do know is that we don't know everything, but we don't know what we don't know. And it scares you when you have that first kid, doesn't it? You don't know everything, but you have no clue what it is that you don't know. And I think it's the reason in life we continue to grow all the time. Why? Because we are constantly being exposed to new things that we didn't know, and then we learn something from it, and then that helps us, and we move forward, And the reason I say is we've been in a series. The series is called The Path. And the topic of the series, really, from the beginning, we laid it out. And it is the truth that your direction determines your destination. Okay? Your direction determines your destination. It is, and we get this, but it's the principle that says, where you want to get, when you're going from one point in life to another point in life, it depends upon more than just your hopes and dreams and intentions. Okay? I mean, it's just like we talked about. If you go and you turn north on I-35, you're going to end up in Minnesota. It doesn't matter how badly you wanted to go to Mexico. Okay? You're going to end up in the wrong place because your direction determines your destination. And so, one of the things that we've worked through, and we've learned really a few things. Okay? The first one is, if you go the wrong direction, you're never going to reach your destination. Right? Because your direction determines your destination. It doesn't matter how badly you want to get there. The other thing that we learned is that when we see danger down the road, the prudent people do what? They assess it and they change course in order to avoid that danger. Whereas the simple just keep going and hope that it will change. Okay? And then we've also learned that when it comes to making decisions, when we come to a fork in the road, we have a decision to make. We cannot trust just what we want and our heart. Why? Because our heart lies to us. It is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. And so, today we're kind of taking all of that and we're going to come into the fact that if we want to have success along this journey, if we want to stay on the right path, if we want to get on the right path, there's some things that we're going to have to do. And one of them is that we need to realize that there are things that we don't know. And so how do we remedy that? Okay, how do we learn the things that we don't know? Well, the answer is, I'm glad you asked, but see, the answer is in Proverbs 15:22, which also is on the front of your bulletin because it's our key verse. And that is that plans fail for the lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Okay? Plans fail for the lack of advisors, of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. So, how do you learn? How do you know, what you don't know? You seek wise counsel. And there's a couple problems here. One of them is that you need to seek counsel from the right advisors. Okay, it's best that you seek counsel from wise counselors. But I think probably one of the biggest things that we struggle with is that we don't seek advice. We don't go looking for wise counsel. We fight it tooth and nail, and I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I don't think that we often go seeking advice because we think we know everything we need to know. We think we know everything we need to know. And this is just ignorance. It really is. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We talked about those that had the prudent see danger and make course corrections. The simple, they see the same danger, don't make any course corrections. And then there's this other group that I said is just ignorant. And they don't see the danger. And because we don't see the danger, we don't know that we need to change course. So then we just close our eyes and we run headlong into the danger. Okay? And so that's one of the reasons that we don't seek advice. We think we know everything that we need to know. So why ask for advice? Okay? I think the second reason is that we don't want to admit that we don't know where we're going. And this isn't just guys, so women, you can just stop with all the male direction jokes, okay? Because we all do it. I think we don't want to admit that we don't know where we're going. We don't want to admit that we don't have a clue, okay, of what's going on. And plain and simple, if the other is ignorance, this is pride. Plain and simple. The scriptures are very clear about what? Pride always comes before the what? The fall. Okay? So when we don't want to admit that we don't know where we're going or don't have a clue, we're setting ourselves up. And I think the other is that it takes too much effort to figure out where to get wise counsel. And this is just laziness. Okay? We're just too lazy to figure out where we should get wise counsel. And you may be able to come up with a couple other examples and say, well, I think it's because of this. I think those three, ignorance, pride, and laziness, encapsulate all the reasons that we don't go looking for good advice. Okay? It's why we don't go seeking it out. So I think that's part of it. Number one, we have got to go seeking advice. But here's the other problem is that, a lot of times our plans fail because we don't seek advice or they don't turn out as well as they could have. They're not as effective as we thought they could have. But I think the other problem is we said it's not enough, just to seek advice. We need to seek advice from the right places. And we need to seek advice and counsel from wise counselors. But here's three reasons I think that we don't. Here's the reason we get advice that is less than stellar. Okay? The first one is because it is easier to get advice from our friends. It's always easier to get advice from our friends. But let's be honest, if you are getting advice from people that are in the same stage of life as you are, that have the same They have the same goals. They have some of the same values. They've got the same dreams, all this other stuff. There's a good chance that they're going to give you advice that what? It lines up with what you think you ought to do. Okay? If you are trying to figure out how to get somewhere, why do you go and seek advice from somebody that's at the same spot in the road as you? Don't you want to get advice from somebody who is ahead of you? Somebody who has been where it is that you're wanting to go? That's why you seek advice from somebody different than those that are in your close group. If you don't know what you don't know, can you be sure that they don't know what you don't know? They don't know? We don't know. That's going to end up on YouTube, isn't it? I know it is. Anyway, okay. I think it's easier to seek advice from our friends. It is also easier to follow the crowd. I mean, I think probably every one of us growing up, you were told at one point or another, your parents asked, so if everybody else was jumping off the cliff, would you, right? That's what that's what the herd assumption, the herd mentality is we assume what? We assume that because everybody else is doing it, it must be the right choice. Okay, that because everybody else is doing it, this must be the right way to go about it. And the fact is, that's not. Okay? You know, it's like we talked about in one of our earlier messages. You always look silly when you are the one guy that is rowing your boat upstream until everybody gets to the waterfall. And that is the problem. You know, when we have this herd assumption that everybody else is doing it, so it must be the right choice. How many of you have gotten into a really bad situation because you did what everybody else was doing? I'm glad there's not very many of us in this room. We all have. We all have, okay? Just always remember this. Wide and crowded is the path that leads to destruction. If everybody else is doing it, there's a good chance it's not the right thing. Third one is it's easier to copy what our parents did. One of the things I always ask couples whenever I do premarital counseling, and I ask them a question. I say, what are some things that you saw in your parents' marriage that you either do or do not want to be part of your marriage, and why? Okay? And it's not because their marriage, because your parents' marriage was bad or anything else. But the thing is that it's to try and get them to look out, to start thinking outside of the box. Because it is very easy to look at what our parents did and just to follow in that. Whether you're talking about marriage, raising kids, choosing a career, whichever it is. But will that always work for you? Not always. Dynamics are different. And beyond that, most of us as we're growing up, we get out on our own, and there may be a lot that we learned from our parents, but we want to do some things differently. We want some different results. Well, here's the deal. If you do the same thing the same way, you're going to get the same results, okay? And so I know it's easier to do that, but that's where I think we need to sometimes think outside of that box. And so that's some of the reasons that I think, number one, we don't seek advice, but also why we sometimes get less than stellar advice, okay? But what is the goal? And this is why we've read this from the very beginning when Solomon compiled Proverbs. He said, the purpose of these sayings, the purpose of these teachings is what? It was so that the wise would listen and add to their learning, and the discerning get guidance. Okay? That's what wisdom is about, and that's really what this seeking of advice and counsel is about as well. Because I think that it's wise people listen, okay? The discerning are willing to take advice and to heed it. Those that don't, the Bible would refer to as the simple, would call them fools, okay? And I know which I don't want to be, which means that I want to be the other. I want to be wise. I want to be discerning. And so What are some of the secrets to getting wise counsel in the first place? I got 3 things. Number 1, realize that you're always going to need good counsel. There is no one who ever gets to a point in their life that they don't need wise counsel anymore. Yeah, I was thinking about, we read in Exodus, and here's Moses. Think about this. Moses, who is chosen by God to do what? To lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt. But because he listened to the wise counsel of his father-in-law, Jethro, he was able to lead even more effectively than he was at that point. And I don't care who you are, whether you can be a student, you can be a parent, you can be a business owner, you can be president of the United States. You need wise counsel. There is never a time that you don't need good advice. Okay, there is never a time that you do not need it. Wise men, wise women, they listen and they add to their learning. Okay, right? If you want to write something down, write that down. Wise men and women listen and add to their learning. Okay, there will never be a time in your life that you don't need wise counsel. Never. Okay, 2. Ask more than one person's advice. Proverbs 11:14 says, "For lack of guidance a nation falls, but many advisors make victory sure." Solomon doesn't say one advisor is good enough. He says many are what ensure victory. We go looking, and so many times we get either the one piece of advice that we like, or we get one we don't like, and then we're done. Okay? Seek many. Seek many forms of guidance. Whenever you make a decision that concerns you, is it important to you? Okay. And the more urgent that the decision feels, the more important it seems, correct? Okay. And if it is an important decision that involves you, do you want to make the right decision? Do you? Is it important that you make the right decision? Is it important that you choose right the first time? Okay. Then listen to the advice of Solomon, that many advisors make victory sure. Seek advice, and seek it from more than one person. What you're going to find a lot of times is you'll pick something, oh man, that really speaks to me. And you know what? This here as well. And you're able to put together a plan of action that you need to do. And then 3rd, admit what you don't know. Proverbs 13:10, this comes back to it, but he says, pride only brings quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Okay? One of the greatest obstacles that I believe you and I face when it comes to seeking, getting, and heeding and listening to advice is pride. Plain and simple. I heard something many years ago that spoke to me. Said, if you walk into a room and you are the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room, because you're never going to learn anything. Okay? Over years, I've tried to add to that. If you walk into a room and you're sure you're the smartest guy in the room, you've just proven that you aren't, and you will never learn anything. There is always something that you can learn from somebody, but it never happens if we're not willing to admit what we don't know. Plain and simple. Proverbs 12:15, Solomon tells this, says, the way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. In other words, the way of a fool seems right to him, but it ain't. Because a wise man listens to advice. Okay, and that's what we need to do. As that relates to our theme of the path, the path of the fool seems right to him, but it's not. Okay, the wise listen and they seek advice from somebody who knows the path, who's been there. A couple of examples. Think about this. A friend goes to another friend and he says, I'm really concerned about some things that are going on in your life. Okay, the foolish friend says, keep your nose out of my business. The wise friend says, what are you seeing? Tell me. Dad goes to his son and says, son, I'm concerned about some of the habits that you are developing. The foolish son says, Dad, it is my life. Get out of it. The wise son says, what do I need to change, Dad? What do you see? Daughter, mother and daughter. Mother goes to daughter, says, honey, I'm concerned that some of your behaviors are going to get you in trouble. Foolish daughter says, Mom, you're a prude. You're old-fashioned. The wise daughter listens and heeds the advice. And it's not just in the family. I mean, think about this. Business owner, employer goes to the employee and says, hey, I know it's not a business. I know it's not a work issue. But can I give you some advice? Well, the foolish employee says what? If it's not a work issue, it's none of your business. The wise employee says, thank you, because I would take all of the advice and the counsel that I can get. And so I think the question that we have to ask is, which way do you respond? Maybe better question, which way have you responded? Which person are you in those discussions? There is a real life example of this that we find it in the Bible. In 2 Chronicles 10 is, and I'm going to let you read it later. Go home and read it this afternoon. 2 Chronicles 10, verses 1 through 19. Chapter 10, it's the account of King Rehoboam. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version, okay? Rehoboam was the son of King Solomon. And so when he became king, the people, okay, Israel, the nation, came to him and they made a request of him. And their request was that they said, hey, we feel like your father, King Solomon, that he laid a heavy burden on us. And so we are asking that you would consider that and make our burden lighter, work-wise. And so King Rehoboam, he does a real smart thing. First off, he says, okay, give me 3 days. He didn't make a hasty decision. He says, give me 3 days and come back and I will have my answer for you. So that was the first thing he did smart. The second thing he did smart is that he went and he got advice from his father's elders, his father's advisors. So in other words, he went to the men who had been part of guiding his father, wisest man to ever live, in leading the nation, and he asked for their advice. And they said, you know what? If you do this and you treat them kindly, they will be your servants forever and they will serve you well. So he leaves there. And he goes to some friends that he grew up with, some people that he grew up with, and he asks their advice. And they basically tell him, oh, you need to just bring down the hammer on them. Let them know who is boss. And he liked that advice better, okay, than he did the first one. In fact, Steve Farrar, he's an author, and he wrote this. I loved his take on it. He said, King Rehoboam went and got the advice of the wise elders, and then he rejected it in exchange for the advice of his selfish drinking buddies, his college buddies who he went to, people he'd grown up with. So what we know is that after 3 days, the people come back to Rehoboam and they say, what is your decision? I don't know what that was. So They go back to him, and here in 2 Chronicles 10:14, this is his answer to him when they say, what have you decided? And he says, my father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, and I will scourge you with scorpions. And as a result, what we know as you read it is that all of the Israelites outside of Judah rebelled against King Rehoboam. In fact, he sent his advisor who was in charge of labor to them, and they stoned him to death. And see, King Rehoboam actually ends up then that he has to flee, and he ends up in exile in Jerusalem. And the scriptures tell us that all of Israel, except for Judah, all of Israel was in rebellion against the house of David from that point on. So here is King Rehoboam, who has the perfect opportunity. And because the wise advisors didn't tell him what he wanted to hear, he went and found somebody that would tell him what he wanted to hear, give him the advice that he was looking for, and as a result, it cost him what? It cost him a united kingdom. It was what he could have had if he would have listened. And I say that because I think that so many times the question that we have to ask is, who has been where you have been before? Who has been where you want to be, where you want to go? Because that's the question I think we need to ask. When we're talking about getting advice, who do you know that has been where you want to go? Who do you know? Whether you're talking about business owners, who do you know that has been where it is that you're hoping to get to, and they've gotten there with their character and their integrity intact? Husbands, wives, who do you know? Who do you know that has been where you want to be? Who has the marriage that you would love to have? One that you look at and I'd love for my marriage to be just like that. Who do you know? Then go to them. Students, what do you think it would look like if you linked up with somebody older than you, somebody that had some wisdom that was further down the journey, and you asked them for guidance and for direction, maybe on study habits or on courses to take, or whether to go to this college or that trade school, or in choosing a career? Parents, how many steps do you think that we would save, and how much heartache would we save our kids if we would go and talk to seasoned parents and get advice from them? We have got to put aside our pride. We got to put aside our fear of not looking like we know what we're doing, and seek guidance and advice. Who do you know that has been where you want to go? Because here's the deal. We've talked about it before. Our life is what? It's a path. We're all on a path. And we know that all paths lead somewhere. And I think that probably every single one of us, if we were honest, we can think of a time when we made a decision or when we chose a path that did not lead where we really want to go. And it may have just cost us some time, it may have cost us some finances, it may have cost us a relationship. It may have us headed in a direction that we never wanted to be in. And if we would have gone to somebody and we would have asked for some guidance, if we would have gotten some direction, if we'd have gone to somebody that was further down the road, somebody that had been where we are now and had learned from it, we wouldn't have made that decision. And I think that's where we've got to get, is understanding that, we've talked about this before. Guys, a week from now, you're going to come to a fork in the road. And you know what I can guarantee you? You've never been there before. Never been there before. Even if it's a situation that you've been in, one just like it. Even if it's a decision that you have made 100 times. I'm telling you, you've never been there before, because you've never been faced with that decision, that situation, that problem at that point in your life. And if you turn around and say, I know everything I need to know, you're going to continue to make the same decisions. So unless you can sit here right now and say, you know what, I am 100% without a doubt, no shadow of a doubt, on the path that I want to be on, and I am on the path that God wants me on every step of the way. Unless you can sit here right now and say that, you need to seek advice when you make decisions. Wise counsel. That's the only way that we're going to get on and stay on the path that God wants us on. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. God has placed people in your life for the sole purpose of giving you counsel. You may not recognize it. You may not like it, but I will guarantee it may be your dad, it may be your mom, it may be your employer, it may be a good friend, it may be somebody that you have known for a long time, maybe somebody you're not even all that tight with. But I will guarantee you, God has put people in your life to give you advice and godly wisdom to help keep you on the path. That's the kind of good God that He is. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to ignore the opportunity He's given me. I don't want to get to my day of judgment and He says, why? Why did you go? And I'm like, well, I didn't know any better. I think you probably look at me and say, I sent so many people to give you direction and guidance and you wouldn't listen. Seek guidance. I'm going to ask you to stand. We're going to have our time of decision. And maybe you're here today and you realize you are on the wrong path. I don't know that I'm necessarily the guidance that you need, but I know that we have men and women in this congregation who would love to come alongside you, walk with you, guide you, lead you, give you direction in so many ways.